Welcome to the new Kevin Smith, The Great Witness Show. This is Dean Val with Dean Kevin, and today we're going to be listening to Dean Kevin's experiences on the real side and see if we can become more aware. Welcome, Kevin. Welcome from the UK. It's February 6th, 2022, and you are on.
In this real side experience, I would find myself in a large house, rather old and dilapidated, but not without its charm. It did seem somewhat overgrown with foliage, as though the environment had encroached upon it and was infused with the very structure of the building. This was not my house, but that of another. My impression was someone that I knew on the physical. Evidently, I had agreement to be here, to enter their personal self-house, and take a wander around, as it were. I had the sense I was almost being permitted to verify that my affiliation with this individual was beneficial, awareness speaking, that it wasn't simply a tap-lining, personal, emotional entanglement that would be of no use to either individual, or that it was an individual drawing me in and seeming sincere, but in fact had other intents and agendas that would lead to tap-liners. The fact that there was this infusion of nature into this person's house, their personal self, revealed this individual was making sense with the whole of life, was sincere in that regard, and nothing I came across in the house suggested otherwise. Almost like executing a background check on an individual with their permission, though of course the real awareness would also determine intent of individuals we encounter on the real side additionally. The individual was on her process of awareness, and going about it in her own unique way, for I would find her in one of the rooms of this huge house with another person. Initially, I would transform myself into some insect or other, for among all the foliage inside this house were all manner of insects, animals, and birds that you would expect to find with such a nature. In this form, I was rather eavesdropping in on the conversation, although within moments I determined that the individual she was talking to was a real guide, as he had that guidely presence about him. I'm unsure as to why I chose to disguise myself in this manner, for the guide knew who I was, despite my guise, and rather played along. The woman whose house it was, and who I knew from the physical, did not realize one of the insects was me, however. Perhaps I didn't want to distract her, for she seemed to be receiving extensive training from the guide, and although in the space of a few moments I'd have said the training went on for months, in physical level agreed to time, eventually the guide would indicate to the woman that there seemed a far more attentive insect than would be characteristic of the species, and as she studied me carefully, I would transform back into my Kevin form, the form that she knew. Her training with the guide was evidently complete, and it was for a specific purpose seemingly, for as the guide faded away, the scene switched, and she was walking toward an aircraft in an open field. I was accompanying her, and would determine that her training had been so that she would be accepted upon a spaceship and become part of the crew. She boarded the aircraft, which looked like a small, earthly created plane. Nothing especially high-tech about it, or otherworldly. I would linger in the plane also, although technically I hadn't an invitation to be aboard. I hadn't received the training this woman had, but she seemed happy enough with my company. As moments passed, other individuals would board this plane and take their seats, and as the plane prepared to depart, it became apparent why their mode of transport was in the form that it was. For this departure location was on Earth, so naturally it made sense for the transport to look very earthly and not draw attention, and all the individuals who had entered the plane had initially also looked human, for the same reason, to not draw attention. But they also had been in disguise. All were aliens, in fact, all with shape-shifting capability, and now, as the plane began to lift off, they reverted to their natural forms. Each individual represented a unique species, and some looked very alien in appearance indeed. Compared to a human body form, some defying any possibility of description. There was actually at one point an altercation between two of the different aliens. This resulted in one of them that looked like a kind of octopus eating the other, so perhaps not the most aware of alien individuals, but intrigued, I would spend the flight speaking with them all, and seemed to get along fine. During the flight, the offer was extended that I join the crew also, for all these aliens here were representing various species that had put forth candidates to be part of a space crew or other for whatever purposes, although I had not received the training the woman I knew had, a training all these aliens had also received. There was still the option that despite this, I could jump straight into the next part of the training, which was more practical and less theory, and if I performed well enough, I could proceed on with further trainings and potentially be a part of this alien crew. That this situation had guide backing, that the woman had been trained for this position by a guide, suggested this a beneficial opportunity to be involved with. Also, I had the sense that my affiliation with these aliens and acceptance among their crew, if my training was successful, would afford me additional options from a physical level perspective also. My personal self had notions that perhaps if things got a little dicey on the physical level, perhaps I could get beamed up or something, if I had to say evade the Earth authorities, or who knows what. It was always good to have options, and besides, it would be an adventure. So I accepted, and the plane we were in would dock with a gigantic spacecraft that was higher in the Earth's atmosphere. Once aboard, the spaceship would leave the Earth and head out into space, where the training would take place. Perhaps it would have been better if I received the training the woman had, for the next phase of the training involved simulated arenas where all the aliens would have to utilize and manage technology and apply it effectively in combat scenarios. Naturally, this was all alien tech, and my personal self didn't know what was going on. Sometimes on the real side, the personal self will just kick back, and the real awareness does what it does with unlimited capability in every situation. Sometimes, as in this case, there is a combination of real awareness, knowingness, but infused with a little personal awareness bewilderment. Part of the training involved assembling weaponry as though from the very ethers, bringing atoms together to form these weapons and technological tools, and then to blast at the other aliens to rack up points on a scoreboard. No individual was harmed in any way. It was all simulated. But the manipulation of creation was required to forge these tools and sci-fi alien blasters. It was essential to get as many points as possible, for those that scored the least would be dropped from the alien crew and sent home to wherever in creation they hailed from. As my score wasn't very impressive, due to my not yet having established how it is one manifests a weapon, I decided to cheat and rendered myself invisible. So while I was figuring out this problem through my personal self, at least I wasn't being shot at. It was surely as though I were a combination of my personal and real awareness. But by being so, my abilities were diminished. I could turn invisible, but couldn't perform in this training as I would had I been fully operating from my real awareness. But perhaps that was the idea, to make it more of a trial, rather than just breeze through it with ease. For surely we become more capable and hardened if the various trials and tests are more arduous than if we simply skip through them with our real awareness. Perhaps it is better this way, in regards to aligning the personal self with the real intent too, that we must face uncertainty and even failure to temper our resolve and test our true determination and heart for the journey, which is ultimately recognition. Anyway, even though I was invisible and no longer providing points for the more adept aliens, my score wasn't benefiting any. So I snatched a weapon from a surprised alien's fingers. As to him, I would have suddenly manifested before him to do so, and proceeded to empty the weapon into him just as the time for the training concluded. This had me surviving being cut from the alien team, as my score didn't occupy the 2 bottom elimination slots due to my sneaky tactics, and so I was able to proceed to further stages of the training. The aliens in charge, very much like sergeants in any military outfit, in their blunt and aggressive mannerisms, were not highly amused with my methods, though they acknowledged my inventiveness and allowed me to continue on, with the understanding that I would play fair, as it were. The trainings now were along similar lines, but far greater in complexity, involving technology, and much of which made no sense to my personal self. The real awareness was not providing any input or assistance at this time, seemingly. As a consequence, I couldn't do a thing right, and was met with continued failure with everything I tried. Such was the level of alien technology I had to deal with, and its application. I was getting a little frustrated. The alien sergeants were getting mightily impatient and irate with me, as the other alien candidates seemed to breeze through everything with ease, and perhaps I was slightly in over my head. As I said, perhaps a far greater test of personal self-character is to have it chucked in the deep end, without assistance from the real awareness, that it and the guides have set up the situation, but then rather leave the personal self floundering in it for its benefit and my overall awareness. And perhaps there was a personal self element that had been a part of what had brought me here. Maybe the notion of potential rescues if things got difficult on the earth was rather a personal self-concern, and as such, a little momentary withdrawing from life, the guides, and the real awareness was a consequence. A personal self-idea and concern, so a situation I would have to deal with without assistance from life, the guides, or my real awareness. Regardless, I botched my way through it, and even was getting a little more adept with the technology, but inevitably I couldn't keep up with the other aliens, and my overall score found its way to the bottom of the scoreboard. Seems my time was up, my little adventure at an end. The option to join an alien crew forfeited. Interestingly, although we had spent what would have been, say, months of training on this spaceship, by my estimation, many, many years had passed on the Earth, a kind of time discrepancy. As time seems to be the agreed and decided upon concept that is contained within the Earth and human locked-in frequency band of visible light, and to have such time variations suggests such alien ships as these can move beyond this frequency band of visible light, beyond the speed of light, as it were, which is the boundary of the frequency band humans operate in, and so they are not subject to the decided upon time that this band of visible light frequency encapsulates. And Earth now had moved through many years, as I said. I'm uncertain as to how far in the future, but there still seemed to be a controlling system in place. And then, just as I thought I would be sent home, another option was made available. For the aliens in charge of this spaceship had pulled a few strings. They had made contact with the controllers of the Earth. Even though I'd failed the training, the aliens would accept me among their crew, but in a kind of bottom-rung worker capacity, like a kind of slave, was how they put it. The government controllers of the Earth had applied a value to every human individual, for of course they consider their human slaves as commodities and property, and it seems that such trading of human slaves on and off the planet was a common practice, and very often other alien factors would simply have to meet the asking price, cover the value of a human slave to acquire the individual for whatever reason. There is an extensive slave trading, human trafficking operation that goes on, involving multitudes of humans being transported, traded, and bartered for, and taken off a planet to work in whatever capacity the various aliens require. and so the controllers of the earth would release me into the hands of this alien crew, but as a paid-for slave. One of the alien leaders thrust a kind of sci-fi computer screen under my nose. It looked like a piece of plastic, but with all these symbols and such around the periphery. Apparently, I had to speak my consent, my agreement into this device, and my position as this slave would be so. Whereas most slaves sold and traded in such an intergalactic way probably wouldn't have the option to voice any protest. But seems I had such an option. Realizing this wasn't quite what I had in mind, but nevertheless I would still be on another adventure, but also that I would have extended agreement to the control of these aliens over me. Then again, maybe I could go along with it and change my decision later on. We are never resigned to the choices and agreements we make and taplines we forge, after all. I was rather lost in my deliberations, and then I woke up. The experience ended. I pondered a little longer on the physical level, and was rather disheartened that I couldn't be part of an alien crew, and who knows where that may lead. And so I sang the NUUU song, connected with my real awareness, and went back to sleep and onto the real side. Seems I had decided to try the training again, for here I was, back on the alien ship, as though everything had rerun to the point where I had first come on board, and I immersed myself in the training, which again followed similar lines, and over a similar duration of several months, I would say. Again, it was quite the struggle, the training arduous, the alien technology just as hard to get to grips with, the alien sergeants constantly on my back, and giving me grief over my inadequacies. But I persevered, and slowly but surely was making progress, and avoiding expulsion from the alien crew. Far better to be an actual, official member of this alien crew than enslaved and contracted to them as a worker. And should I complete this training, I would be part of the crew, and affiliated with all these other aliens that also were part of it, aliens that represented their own respective species. This could potentially be beneficial on many fronts in regards to the galactic endeavors, to getting agreement from all the species these various aliens represented, to the galactic projects, a kind of intergalactic networking, a means to perhaps get a wide-ranging collection of alien species on board and in agreement. And perhaps this entire experience was to that end, but in such a way, with my personal self left hanging, as it were, with limited assistance, that it would prove my personal self-determination to want to move ahead with this, for it would have been very easy to just have given up, or even to have assumed a lesser position as some kind of slave.
Well, overall, that was terrific, Kevin, because again, infiltrating, and yes, this is what I've been doing for years with the funding and the particulars I have. Same thing, infiltrating. And yes, there are huge obstacles always. And met so many people that want to stop me, want to rearrange things accordingly, etc. And here you are. Yes, you're persistent at this, and you know your adventure. And yes, it's a decision you're making, and it's fine. Because again, we're all here doing something. We're waking up, and we become infiltrators. We don't necessarily become segregated, okay, as things have been. I was brought up like this too, even in the corporation with Paul, etc. It was more of a segregation. Oh, we were Ekis and they were Christians and this is that and whatever. Well, no more. You know, all life is one, and the thing is that it's the all isness life is, and we do whatever we can because of the complications of the systems here, etc. So, you know, even though the systems have been created and they apply certain things, their rules, their regulations, what they want done, how they want the procedures done, well, we ourselves can decide whatever we want. And again, you know, I see reports of things that, oh, this is this and this is that, according to what I'm trying to do with the funding, etc. But I don't listen to them because, again, that's somebody else deciding. I will decide, just like James Bond, I will decide my adventure. I will decide what to do. I will decide how to get it done. So it's going to take a little while, etc. But overall, there you are. And very few will take on the challenge to do that. Most people will just sit and comment and have attitudes instead of doing something real and stepping up and taking the risk like you do. So that was just terrific. That's something to really ponder for everybody. Thank you for being, again, so candid, Kevin. It's just terrific that you're having these experiences and etc. And you have earned your way to have these experiences and to be set into these places. And again, it's your choice to continue or not. And most people won't. They'll have an experience, they'll go away, they'll hide, they won't say anything, etc. Who will step up? This place is imploding upon itself. It's time to get real, isn't it? Yes, thank you so much.
Wow. Yeah, by all means, make friends with these aliens, Kevin, so we can utilize their knowledge and technology when we need them. So that's really cool. It's interesting. Yeah, you talk about we know it's a human farming planet here, and I really didn't consider that they could really tag different humans for different reasons. You know, some for meat and some for training to be evil or to be leaders or to learn their technology to do things, you know, for them here. But it's that kind of place here we live in here in the physical. You talked about frequencies too, and we talk about the Tartarians and how these frequencies to move around and it's, in a way, it's easy, you know, when you know what to tune into and to utilize. So these aliens have that, and you learned, you know, you were learning what they were doing there on the ship, and I mean, the struggle with it, but that's good. You kept with it. You went back again after you woke up and went back again, tried again. And let's see, Paul talked about the saint that he was about to be executed, and he moved his body, bilocated. So we're kind of dumbed down here in the physical, where we've been trained and indoctrinated to see things here and perceive things in the physical. But in the past, like I mentioned, the Tartarians and who knows what before that, what was going on here, how people were living and what they were aware of. And so it's just so interesting how people are so they don't know their potential. They just dumb down, literally dumb down to where they don't know what they're very, very limited in their scope of awareness and abilities here. But you make it fun. You make it see how there's so much more going on with your experiences. So when people listen to this, they can expand and see opportunities here with their own lives. Thank you, Kevin. That was good.
Yeah, that was always my first motivation when I came to the new presentation, because Dwayne has always said how when people first approach this process of awareness, naturally they're going to be approaching it from their personal self perspective and what their personal self can get out of it, because it's only natural, because everyone has been immersed in their personal self for so many eons and millions of lifetimes that until they do make the connections to their real awareness and see how all the ideas of creation are just references and illusion and fabrication and anime and just simulation, and only really for comparisons to recognise the is by, until they reach that point, they consider all their little creations and that which they chase very, very important. And so Dwayne always says when people approach a new presentation for the first time, it's always from a thrill-seeking and what can the personal self get out of it perspective. And I was exactly the same, because when I came to the new presentation, when I was reading Dwayne's books, the first book and the second, and it was describing all his amazing adventures, how he was meeting all these aliens and all these reptilians and the life level gods. I mean, for me, I always had a sort of exploratory nature. I always was one that always wanted to explore beyond what the limitations of the physical level, and that's why I was always pursuing the lucid dreaming, astral projections and things of that nature. And so when I came to the new presentation, it was almost initially as an extension of that. And I thought, oh, this is be exciting. I can go on these life levels and meet all these gods and meet all these aliens and go gallivanting interdimensionally and see what adventures I can get into. So that was always what I came into initially. But then obviously after the initial sort of thrill of it, you sort of then realise the real sort of purpose behind all these activities. Were even though it's not really an issue to have a bit of fun and enjoy yourself and and enjoy the adventure and the process, you do sort of realise the more, I suppose, serious side of it, which is the purpose what all these experiences actually are, which is to recognise the is from. And so initially, even though you can, as I said, get a bit overawed with all the experiences and all the amazing adventures, you have to be a little bit careful too. You don't get lost in them as well, because it's very easy to I mean, just as much as you can get stuck in creation through all the distractions and the phenomena on the physical level, you can easily do it as well on the real side as well. And there's an even greater plethora and an even greater sort of a range of sort of, I suppose, distractions that can sort of captivate you and keep you locked into creation. And so it's almost like a fine line between having these adventures, having a getting and so on and so forth, but realizing them for what they are. That, like anything, it's all just simulation. It all isn't real, and of course its only purpose is to recognize the is by. So it's I can see how it would be very easy for some individuals, if they did have a lot of these real side experiences, they could get a bit too absorbed in them and they may never move beyond them. So I remember Dwayne says as well that there's a point where you eventually get beyond the experiences, and the experiences again are only a step, but it's the idea of what the experiences are hinting and referencing and pointing to, which is the is. And so it's I just thought I'd add that as well.
Yeah, these days there's a group of people like the New Age people or the ascension people, or, you know, age of Aquarius, saviors coming, that kind of thing, you know, new consciousness coming in. Well, in a way, yeah, we're here. So, but they're going to be looking at it from their own point of view, the human personal viewpoint, and they're expecting certain things. They're going to see it, or they want to see it certain ways, but most of them don't see it because it's so unique and real that their idea of it is not what it is. So it's going to be a challenge for these people to see beyond their ideas of what they think this means, this new whatever coming in. And it is, there's a lot going on right now, but it's going to take a lot for them to see through their own considerations to see what really is going on here. Yeah, it's a huge turn they have to make. I mean, it's really big. It's not, it's just, you know, it's like out of creation, and they're still immersed in their creational bubble. So it's, for anybody, it's going to be a huge turn there. Something's got to happen within the person to see, you know. So whatever that is, I don't know. We're trying different ways, whatever we can here.
Yes, the previous experience was January the 27th, 2021. This one was February the 4th, 2021. As I said, this was an experience that followed a couple of nights later, and I shared it on the next Galactic SKYPE, I remember. And although they weren't connected, as I said, they were very close together, so I made them a little package. And so this one here. Just prior to going to sleep on this occasion, I had the motivation to ensure I very much was standing in the nowness of my real awareness, placing the thoughts and emotions aside, as is the discipline generally of those wanting to recognize the ease, a practice to endeavour to always be in the nowness of this true reality and focus there, that we may eventually have this recognition of the ease. Sometimes I find that when I practice this focus away from all distractions, I can go into a very deep place within myself, and I aid the practice of being isness, being now with my real awareness, by bringing the imagination initially to bear, imagining the ideas that incorporate the personal self as layers that thin and then dissipate and float away, that the personal self becomes more so fainter and fainter, and then I stop the imaginative ethereal body from operating also. For as we know, the extent to which we stand in the real awareness dictates the extent to which we can have our real side experiences direct from life and the guides, with less personal self-inclusion. The personal self, which adds extra elements to our experiences, we then have to tease out, as they rather muddy the waters somewhat of what it is life and the guides are trying to show us, to the extent that if we are too much sat in the ideas of the personal self, we obscure entirely the experiences from the real awareness and what it is doing. With some experiences, it is seemingly more important than others that we don't allow ourselves to entertain and sit in the ideas of the personal self, as some experiences do require a stretching of our recognition more so than others, and the obscuring with anything personal self created will not help in such situations. If I have the impression to want to put myself in such a very focused place before sleep, it's usually a nudge from the real awareness that is encouraging this, and usually the experience that follows would require the personal self placed aside as best as I am able, that I can bring back the experience and not have it personal self obscured, and so my personal self will go along with it, as the real side experience that followed would present as a kind of exploration, a scouting of a kind that must have demanded this degree of laser nowness focus just prior to sleep to ensure I would not obscure what was taking place. For whatever reason, I seemed to be travelling through realms and dimensions. The sense of it was as though I was going forever deeper into myself, so maybe a moving through the psych realm levels that stem from each body vehicle, but visually it was as though I was going upwards at the same time, flying skyward. The experience presented this way was more for the personal self to relate to, I suppose, and the flight upward began from my back garden, the subconscious. So I suggest my exploration was possibly on the ethereal life level. The going inwards deeper sensation was the moving through each layer of the created personal self to reach this final aspect of the created self, and the simultaneous upwards motion then a literal scene for my personal self to understand better, with the addition of the back garden to impress upon the personal self that this was indeed the subconscious, the ethereal level. For it seemed now, as I went upwards, that I was passing through dimensional layers within the ethereal, is the best I can describe it, and even was provided numbers that popped into my awareness that corresponded with the levels I was ascending, all literal of course, but nevertheless. At each level there seemed to be a guardian, a mighty creature or being that was the overseer of each level, and my impression was that this was all on the ethereal. I would travel up to what was revealed to be level 18. I couldn't recall all the appearances of these guardians on waking, and in fact during the experience itself, it's as though they were not all made clear to me, or were so strange that my personal self had difficulty understanding what it was seeing. But all were colossal beings, and exuded a mighty sense of a power that would be very daunting to any personal self. Although it seemed that level 18 was as far as I was, in some way, permitted to go. Not that I was unable, but that I had the strong sense that I should not trespass further, or indeed higher, beyond this 18th level. The 18th level guardian I did recall. He was a gigantic individual made of stone, but curiously he seemed locked into his position, as great chains were attached to his stone body and bolted to the ground he stood upon. He didn't have legs, but more a kind of a blunted base, like a stone statue that was only completed down to the waist, and below that a mound of unsculptured rock. As I entered his level, his movements were limited by the chains he bore, but he would swivel in my direction as much as his restrictions would allow, and fix me with a stony gaze, quite literally. I sensed no malice from him, though the impression of his tremendous creational power. He was aware of me entering his level, as all these guardians were, though this one was the only one bound by chains, as though resigned to his post, and I had the impression it was rather a situation of his deciding. All situations are, of course, based on our decisions, if we realize it or not, but more so he was conscious and compliant with that which affected his situation, and also that he knew he could change his circumstances, but didn't wish to do so, as though this were his decided post. I still had this strong sense that I must not go higher through levels beyond the 18th, but despite this I couldn't help but continue on regardless, even though perhaps this wasn't a wise course of action, and I would continue upwards through further levels, and up till level 26. I'm uncertain if there were more beyond that, but that's as far as I did go, because of the situation I now found myself in. For all these guardians, up until level 18, seemed not to care as to my presence. They were aware of me, but paid me little mind. But beyond level 18, all the guardians seemed very disgruntled by my entering their levels. A level 18 that presented as a kind of a boundary that one shouldn't pass beyond, as though it was forbidden. The guardians beyond level 18 were equally as mighty in stature and creational power, and, coupled with aggression as to my encroaching on their forbidden levels, they all would attack me the moment I entered each level. It all became quite the circus, as I entered level after level beyond the 18th, and was pursued and assailed by each guardian. Some of the guardians were not resigned to their own levels. Seems they could move freely, but only downwards through levels beneath their own. They could not ascend to levels above where they were stationed as overseers, probably due to limits in their awareness that disallowed them from going higher, literally speaking, into creational positions that required more awareness and recognition than they had. And I imagine this held true for the Guardians from level 18 and downwards, except they had no want to chase me. So to evade the Guardians, I realised the best course of action was to keep going upwards, that they could not follow. And eventually I reached level 26. With 8 very annoyed Guardians below this level, frustrated at being unable to lay their colossal hands or appendages on me, for yes, some of these Guardians looked like Hollywood monsters. The Guardian of level 26 was a gigantic dragon, and curiously again, he was made of stone, just as the level 18 Guardian had been, though no other Guardian throughout these levels from 1 to 26, other than those two, had a body of stone, as I recall. This dragon wasn't restrained, however. He flew freely in the skies of his level with his gigantic wingspan. I don't remember much, if any, of the scenes I was in, the detail and environments, other than the Guardians that were there. After a while, this dragon would become aware of me, and like the others, would swoop in to attack. And each level did denote a greater power with each Guardian. So this was the most powerful being and a very formidable adversary. I would decide to retreat, and the only way seemed to be back down. Perhaps my own awareness and recognition only allowed me this far. Down through the levels I then descended, and all the Guardians I had enraged on the way up, including this mighty stone dragon, were now attacking and pursuing me as I entered again each of their levels, allowing that they could now attempt to assail me again. And as I dropped through levels below level 18, I had then 8 of the Guardians from 18 to 26 chasing me. What followed was a relentless pursuit through realms, dimensions, places in creation, as I continuously pinged from place to place in an attempt to shake the Guardians, who had little trouble in chasing me across creation. I tried to ward them off with the NUUU song, but found this was entirely ineffective. Perhaps some decision or agreements with my personal self was allowing this attack to be. Free will agreements that overrode the repelling of all things ill-intended sounds of the NUUU song. At this point, I would awake on the physical, but still had the strong sense of these guardians, as though they were close at hand, as though almost they could encroach even on the physical, or at least manipulate it from the real side. But this abated as I remained in my wakened state on the physical. Then I decided to sing the NUUU and return to the real side. I found myself now with a group of individuals, an aware group as were my impressions, and no guardians were present, as though they had returned to the levels they were the overseers of. We would be in a natural environment setting. It was late at night, and we were expecting the arrival of aliens in their spacecraft at any moment. It was as though we had agreed to rendezvous with the aliens here for whatever reason we had for doing so. In the meantime, one of our number had wandered off and seemingly getting himself lost. The rest of the group and I elected to determine as to his whereabouts, and our search would take us up a steep hill and to a very elaborate and large building like a mansion. We knew our lost associate was inside. The impression was that he was being held there by those that owned and dwelled in this mansion. The scene switched to us now being inside the building and in a lavish, richly decorated and furnished room. We hadn't broken in, more so had been allowed access, and here we were. The member of our group was present and sat in a chair, though he would not depart unless permitted to by the mansion owners, it seemed. Our hosts were a curious group of what I can only describe as demons, their faces twisted and sprouting horns. Some of them had features that wouldn't even be recognizable as that which you'd usually expect to see on a face. The one in charge was white-skinned and had no eyes, yet this didn't seem to present a problem for him as he addressed me directly. He had no facial features, in fact, except a large, rounded mouth, like that of a leech or a lamprey. It was revealed that these were demonic beings of a kind, and very capable in their own right, and in fact, even though we had been here to meet with aliens, and perhaps we still would at a later time, though not in this experience, it's as though this was an inadvertent opportunity that had been presented to us. For these particular demons were, yes, rather abrasive in their attitudes and conduct, not the kind of characters you'd invite for dinner, but they too were concerned with what was happening in the simulator, its demise, etc. They were aware of its deterioration and subsequent ramifications for them and their demonic kind. They had kidnapped the member of our group, as he must have trespassed on their territory, as it were, and perhaps intended to do him harm, as was their overall nature and inclination. But it was more like the member of our group had allowed himself to be captured. He deliberately infringed on the demons' turf, knowing that they would capture him, but also that this could only have occurred if he allowed them to do so, protected as he was with the capabilities afforded him through his real awareness. He was rather playing along, that we would then seek him out and find ourselves in the company of these demons. We then would learn of their concerns over the simulator, amidst their threats of how they were going to kill the captured group member and us also, etc. And we rather played along also, because we knew that if we could bring these demons on board to assist with the galactic endeavours, they could be very instrumental, as they had great leverage and influence within the dubious circles they operated within. And now it was revealed as to the reason for my exploration of these guardian levels in the first scene. These demons here, by assisting the galactic projects, this would actually assist them in saving their lives, as it were, but they were not exactly aware beings, so didn't see this. They wanted to escape an imploding simulator, but didn't grasp the concept fully of everything equaling itself, earning your way to your recognition of the ears through the sharing and promoting of it, etc. Their motivations more personal, self-driven. Nevertheless, they would agree to assist, but only if they were provided information about the levels I had explored and the guardians that resided there, for there seemed to be a conflict of interests or other between these demons and those guardians in some strange, convoluted way, almost like a squabbling over possession of certain areas of creation was my impression, though I'm unsure as to the exact details. But it was as though these demons were unable to find these guardians or their realms despite everything. Perhaps they didn't have the awareness to access the positions in life these guardians resided in. I had the overall sense that revealing this information would be beneficial overall, as the demons here would get on board and assist with the galactic projects and would afford great assistance, but they would probably attempt to antagonize more directly these guardians, if indeed the information of their whereabouts would have any bearing on their ability to actually go to where they resided. But I had the sense of the possibility that maybe these guardians could be brought into the bigger picture also as a result. Maybe when the silly nonsense between the demons and them settled. and with this possibility presented to these demons, that they could escape the simulator, perhaps they would consider this more important than squabbling with other beings after all, especially if they realized they couldn't actually reach the guardians through their lack of awareness. My reasoning seemed sincere and well-intended, and I was dealing with all these very aggressive and attitude-orientated individuals, demons and guardians alike, but they all represented a tremendous influence on creational affairs in their own respective ways, and so it was worth a try to garner more agreement to offset the simulator demise, and this situation did seem to have been presented to me, and an opportunity rising from it all. Although not exactly getting agreement from the guardians, I had bothered them, made myself known, got their attention, and with the drama between the demons and these guardians, perhaps these guardians could be brought into the galactic projects too, in some way or other, or maybe I was only to learn of them that I could give these demons the information they wanted, that the demons would agree to come on board, and really I had the sense the information would make little difference anyway. The demons and guardians seemed separated by recognitional boundaries after all. In the last scene, I would suddenly be with the same group of aware individuals, and we were walking with 2 additional people that, based on my impressions of them, were real guides. There was exchange of impressions, more so than verbal dialogue, but it was as though we were being debriefed by the guides after our encounters with the demons, for they of course knew what had transpired. We also were being prepped for another assignment on the back of it, and as we walked, the ground was breaking up in places, and boiling hot, black tar-like liquid was seeping from the cracks. We would each take turns falling into some of the holes, but it wasn't really a problem. We just scrambled back out, helped each other to the surface again, etc., as though a representation of supporting each other, as we each traversed through the trials and tribulations of creation, represented by the ground breaking up here, as indeed creation is rather a minefield of potential idea snares we can fall into, and the ground breaking up synonymous of a simulator in decay. Or it could have represented the overall idea of the real guides redoing everything, a further representation of this, and we had to keep our focus and keep up with it, maintain agreement to it, or fall back with what was rather than what is and being currently made so. And yes, we fluctuated a little. We fell in the holes and fissures as we made errors and mistakes, but with our real intent maintained, and with the support we afforded each other, we soldiered on and kept up with the guides, who were completely unhindered by the terrain naturally. The scene skipped, and we were going through a kind of labyrinthian maze, full of obstacles and adversaries, but we endured. Interestingly, the main opposition to our progress was in the form of zombified animals that, if they bit you, would inflict you with the zombie taint, suggesting perhaps how even the animals will be continually affected by the imposition of electromagnetic pollution technologies as the controllers continue to ramp that up, and maybe even animals can be geared to attack individuals like animal Manchurian candidates. But anyway, we emerged from this place and back onto the surface, as it had been underground, and everything seemed far more technological now, as though we had passed through some technological area or other, in fact, and now it was as though we had emerged onto a kind of high-tech science fiction platform, and indeed we had to evade laser fire from security technology that was installed, which had the appearance of metallic football-sized spheres that would lock onto you and blast laser beams with a terminal intent. The experience would end there, and I would awake.
Okay, Kevin, terrific again. That explains a lot. And yes, as you were starting off through this experience and the levels, just like all the buildings you see out there in the cities, each building has their levels. So you're somewhere in creation, wherever it is. It's designated to be so. You can call it whatever you will, doesn't really matter. So again, getting the experience, you're getting the experience because you're willing, and to touch base with these individuals, and the guides are there allowing you to have the experience because you have the intent, which most people don't. They won't even touch this stuff, or they want to get funny with it, etc. But again, you're the scout, and so are all of us that have the intent to do anything, etc. So we're having our own experiences with all of this. Focus and put it together, and yes, at a certain point, you're confronting these individuals and letting them know that's the adventure of what's going on in creation. Very real, whether they accept it or not. It's all right in front of them, especially the black holes and the galaxies, and they have them there too. So we are beyond the religions and the spiritual ideas and all these cute little passive things that really don't work anymore. They were fine in their day for a little while, but the reality is, and the real guides, it's the focus, it's real survival. It's not about emotional bliss or happiness or contentment, peace on earth, and all these things. No. It's about real survival in the real universes, because otherwise you keep going through the simulator. Very real. So all the emotional attachments, relationships, etc., good luck. They equal nothing because it's all paid up. That's exactly how it is. And actually, these relationships usually become liabilities to both parties. So again, a decision is made. So as you go on with the adventure, it's all about awareness, isn't it? And so we have that shadow we created in creation for a purpose to help us recognize. But we're way beyond that. Our focus is the real universe and the all is, to recognize that, because that has real value, it's a real position, real purpose, with real survival. Everything else, we're stuck in creation. That's really how it is. And so you see, too, these individuals, even though they seem very prominent in their own way, etc., look at the attitudes they have. Worthless, and they have their position, and they want to occupy certain areas that are so-called theirs, like the cartel or the mafia, etc., or the governments of the world. They proclaim this or that bunch of nonsense, etc. So no, that's just terrific, Kevin. Very good description, and all these things will make for terrific Netflix series when they wake up. And as the funding comes nearer and we get something here, whatever it is, or the UFOs first, or the AI, whatever, we will take over, just like you saw before, the universities in the future, and this is what we'll provide for people. They will get some real adventures like never before. So, wow, that's just terrific.
Yeah, we talk about the demons and the guardians and the bad boys trying to see if they can turn too, because they have, in a way, their own potential, because they're taking the risk and they're, in a way, creative in their own way, and they're not limited. Like with most people that are indoctrinated, they're limited by their own ideas of things, being good person or the rules and regulations. Well, the bad guys don't care about rules and regulations, so they're free for all, in a way. So in a way, if they turn, if they see this, then they have a lot of potential in their own way. We have an appointment with the aliens too, in the physical. We're going to try to see them probably in the next full moon. We have a young lady down here that's seen them in the estuary down here about 20 minutes south of us in Baja. She's connected with them as light orbs a while back. So Dwayne and I and her probably go back down there the next full moon and see if we can make contact in the physical. And then just this awareness. Awareness is so cool the way it is. It just is, and it's just so. It's everything, but it's not the five bodies, really. We're aware of the five bodies: physical, emotional, memory, mental, etheric. Etheric not so much, but we use the intuitive part of that. But awareness is just so cool when you see how this works and see how you can expand your awareness and become more aware. It's like everything. It's like, it's so real, it's so wonderful, so pure, so sincere. And it just is. There's really nothing you just see it as it is, awareness. And you really can't hold on to it or own it or anything, but it's just something that you see, you perceive. It's about perceiving what is, what already is. And it's never ending. It keeps on going. So that's where you have this adventure part, and that's what you're sharing here, which is so cool. You just keep after it and penetrate it, you could say, and keep sharing with us. And it's so cool, Kevin. Thank you for all you do. It's neat hearing what you come back with. Thank you very much.
Yeah, Dwayne said the other day on a Skype that the only way you can become aware of more and see more is only if you are completely open to doing so. The moment you take on the consideration that you know what life is all about, or that you think you know something, or think you've sussed or understand it all, that's when you sort of block yourself off from seeing more. And so Dwayne always encourages, you've always got to put yourself in a position where you know what you know and have experience and are aware of what you are, but there's always more to see and more to be and more to experience. And so if you put yourself in that mode, then there's always something new that you will be shown and be made aware of. And it's quite interesting in regards to the demons in that experience, because a couple of nights ago I had another situation involving demons as well, but these were rather antagonistic, aggressively orientated, attitude-driven demons, and it was a situation where what we were doing was inciting them into attacking us, and then we were with the guides and we had to contain them, and it was a situation where it was as though what we were doing was beneficial in what we were creating, but we also knew it would incite these particular demons to sort of make their presence known and attempt to attack us. But as is often the case, a lot of times these situations and certain things are set in motion that will very likely incite such beings to be abrasive as according to their consciousness. But then the karma, that the effects of their abrasiveness can then be managed creatively, and you can have situations where individuals can be put in the phantom zone, for example, or simply put out of the way or displaced. And the experience I had involving the demons was along those lines. But I'm going to share that one on the Galactic Skype tomorrow. So yeah.
Great. Well, thank you, Kevin. That's new Kevin Smith, the Great Witness, and February. Again, I like to say the dates, so kind of keep track of this. February 6th, 2022. Thanks, Kevin. NUUU.